From CBS News in Washington, Face the Nation with Bob Schieffer.
And good morning again, and welcome to Face the Nation on this Mother's Day. We're going to hear many voices on this issue of gay marriage, same-sex marriage this morning. But we're going to begin with Massachusetts Governor Deval Patrick, who's in Richmond, Massachusetts, and former Bush Administration Solicitor General Ted Olson, who joins us from Ellison Bay, Wisconsin. Gentlemen, a Gallup poll out Friday shows that 60% of Americans say the president's support for same-sex marriage will have no impact on whether or not they'll vote for him, versus 26% who say it will make them less likely to vote for him, and 13% who say they are more likely to vote for him because of this announcement. I want to go first to Ted Olson, the conservatives' conservative, the founder of the Federalist Society, George Bush's Solicitor General. But you, Mr. Olson, joined with David Boies to argue in federal court that California's ban on gay marriage should be overturned, a case that may well go now to the Supreme Court. You've also been very active in Republican politics over the years, so I want to ask you to start here. What is your advice now to Mitt Romney and Republicans in general on how to handle the statement that the president made?
Well, I think it's very important for everyone, Republicans and Democrats alike, liberals and conservatives, to recognize that the right of individuals who love one another to get married and to be respected and treated with equality and dignity is exceedingly important. The more people understand that people have been waiting for years for the opportunity for their relationships to be treated equally and so that they can form a loving household is exceedingly important. And it's an American value, and we should all recognize that.
Do you think it was a smart political move for the president? Because many people, and most polls show that gay and lesbian voters would have voted for him anyway. Is this going to help him politically, or will it hurt him?
Bob, no one asked me for political advice. I would say that it's an important statement as an American, as the President of the United States, to recognize the equality and dignity of our gay and lesbian brothers and sisters and friends and neighbors. That's what's important, not what was right or wrong or popular or unpopular politically. I don't know about politics. I do know about human rights and constitutional rights, and on that basis, I think the president did the right thing, and I'm very glad he did it.
I would argue with you on one thing. I think you do know about politics, but we won't go into that right now. Governor Patrick, many religious voters, including many black voters, are opposed to same-sex marriage. Is this issue going to threaten and hurt the president politically?
I don't think so, Bob, and I want to thank Ted for his clear and principled position on this issue, and it's consistent with the president's clear and principled position on the issue because it's about convictions. It's not about politics. You know, I dealt with something similar in Massachusetts when I was running the first time and dealing with black clergy, and the point I made to them is the same point the president makes to voters nationally, which is that we don't have to agree on everything before we work together on anything. People get that this is about human dignity. And I applaud the president for standing up for human dignity. That is an American value, and it's a real indication of this president's leadership.
Well, some Republicans have said, and we may hear this, I suspect, in just a minute or two from some of the other folks on the panel, that this really is going to galvanize, in some ways, Governor Romney's support, because there were a lot of people on the right side of the Republican Party that were not quite sure of him on social issues. Do you think some social conservatives who might have been just lukewarm about Mitt Romney may now come right over and say, I really like the guy now?
Well, they may. It's, you know, those are voters, I suspect, who are not likely to vote for the president anyway, unless they vote their interests, which are economic interests, and this president is foursquare with them and standing with them in this election and in office. I think what we know is that Mitt Romney has occupied many positions on many issues, and he has, you know, back in 1994 when he was running for the United States Senate, he said publicly that he would be better than Ted Kennedy on gay and lesbian issues. He takes a different position in front of a different audience today. I think conservative voters know that about Mitt Romney. I think the American people know that about Mitt Romney, as distinct from Barack Obama, who is running on and leading through a set of convictions.
Mr. Olson, let me ask you, do you intend to, in fact, support Mitt Romney this time around?
I fully expect to, yes. I think that he would make a great president, and he's very, very strong on so many things that I believe in and so many things that the American people believe in. I think that with respect to this issue is evolving, and the more that the American people understand we're talking about the human heart and the dignity of our brothers and sisters, more and more people will come around and decide to allow individuals the right to marry the person that they love.
All right. Well, I want to thank both of you. I want to broaden the discussion out now and bring in some other folks. Also joining us this morning, Tony Perkins of the Family Research Council, Clay Aken, who all of you know from his American Idol appearances and subsequent fame as the singer and a songwriter, Newsweek contributor Mark Mckinnon, who was one of George W. Bush's campaign advisors and chief strategists, Evan Wolfson, who heads up Freedom to Marry, a group working for same-sex marriage. Tony Perkins, let me just go to you first, because I know your organization has opposed same-sex marriage from the start. So where do you see this going now?
Well, clearly, when you see where this is going in the states, 32 states have voted to preserve the traditional definition of marriage. The Gallup poll, one released end of last week, actually shows a 6-point shift toward traditional marriage. We have 50% say it's okay, 48% say no, but it's shifting. And I think in part is because, as Ted Olson said, I do think people are beginning to understand more that this is about more than just marriage. I mean, couples today can live together, they can enter into civil contracts, they can get health benefits from their employer. What same-sex marriage is about is forcing the state to coerce others to accept relationships that run counter to their religious tradition. It's about curriculum in our schools. It's stepping in between the relationship between a parent and a child. And as more Americans see that there's a lot more to this than just walking down the aisle, the opposition is growing.
Well, I mean, do you see this as a line being drawn here? I mean, do you think that this will be one of the defining issues this time around? I mean, the poll says 60% of the people say doesn't.
Well, it's interesting that we've heard this quite frequently, that the social and moral issues don't matter, but it's what took Rick Santorum from 1% in the Republican primary to almost replacing Mitt Romney as the nominee. These issues do matter. I don't think the president did a political calculus to do this, because if he did, he needs to go back to the calculator, because it's a bad formula. Because when you look at the states, North Carolina, a key swing state, Ohio, they have an amendment. You know, 16 the key swing states, 10 of them have marriage amendments. And these marriage amendments haven't just kind of barely eked across the line. They've passed on average with 67% of the public behind them. So I think he was making a clear statement. I think Mitt Romney at my alma mater yesterday made a very strong statement. Weaving it into the other issues, I thought he hit just the right tone yesterday.
Let me ask you about something that Senator Rand Paul said. We ran it at the top of the broadcast, but I just want to get your thought on this.
The president, recently weighed in on marriage, and, he said that his views were evolving on marriage. And call me cynical, but I wasn't sure that his views on marriage could get any gayer.
Got a big laugh there. What's your take?
I don't think it's a laughing matter. I don't think this is something we should joke about. We're talking about individuals who feel very strongly on one way or the other, and I think we should be civil, respectful, allowing all sides to have the debate. I'm glad that's what you're doing here this morning. But I think this is not something to laugh about. It's not something to poke fun at other people about. This is a very serious issue, and I think it's very much like the abortion issue. 40 years into Roe v. Wade, the issue is still not resolved, and I think in part is because when you go back to civil rights are rooted in natural law. Americans just don't see same-sex marriage being natural.
Let me go to Clay Aken. You are from North Carolina. The day before the president spoke, as Tony Perkins says, your home state overwhelmingly voted to defeat an initiative that basically gave domestic partners the same rights as people who are married. You are openly gay, but did the president's statement, you think, pretty much ensure he's going to lose your home state of North Carolina?
No, I don't. I think a lot of people, I don't agree that it seals it up for him. While we certainly see, as you said, 60% of people people say it won't matter. I think the people who say it will matter on either side of the equation probably were not going to vote for Obama, or were going to vote for President Obama anyway. I think as people in North Carolina start to look at this amendment and realize what it's doing, not just for same-sex couples, but for straight couples as well, they're going to reject it. The polls in North Carolina show that over 60% of North Carolinians actually support some sort of recognition for same-sex couples, be it civil unions or domestic partnerships. And it was sort of a political calculation on the part of some people in the General Assembly to get this on the ballot. And as North Carolinians see what it's done and what it will do, I think that they will support the fact that President Obama did speak out on principle. It wasn't a political calculation, you're right, because you know, he spoke out and he said, this is what I believe. And I think that we'd like to see politicians speak out on principle a little bit more and not do things politically calculated.
Evan Wolfson, you head a group that's determined to get same-sex marriage legalized nationwide. Some activists are actually talking now about trying to move the convention from North Carolina because of that vote that they took. Do you support that?
No, I do not. I think what we need in North Carolina and throughout the country is exactly what the president exemplified, which is talking about the conversations he's had in his life with real gay people, real families. He talked so powerfully about the conversations he and First Lady Michelle Obama have had about it, and that they've had with their own daughters. And they talked about how their daughters have classmates who they can't understand why their classmates' families wouldn't be treated fairly. These are the kinds of conversations that are changing hearts and minds. We're going to see more of those conversations in North Carolina, and the arc will continue. I think what the president did was show real moral leadership, and he also underscored that when we talk about real families, it turns out there is no good reason for denying those families the golden rule of treating them as you would want to be treated, the very values he and Michelle are trying to teach their kids.
Let me now go to Mark Mckinnon. You are a political strategist, and people on both sides say you are very good at what you do. You were one of the chief architects of the President Bush's victories. You wrote a piece in the Daily Beast recently and said Republicans basically need to kind of go carefully on this.
Well, I actually said that Republicans should recognize that what's important is that we have a president who leads and stands for what he believes in. President Bush won re-election in 2004, not because people liked him necessarily or even agreed with his policies. They voted for him because they thought he had core principles and he'd fight for them consistently. So I give the president great credit for voting his conscience, because when you net this all out, it's not a political winner. I mean, North Carolina is very difficult. It's a key swing state. Think about all the 9 swing states: Arizona, Iowa, Colorado, Florida, Iowa, Missouri, New Hampshire, North Carolina, Ohio, and Virginia. When you look at those states and think about where's that going to help them, probably in just one, Colorado, maybe New Hampshire. But otherwise, in the rest of those states, arguably, it's a net loser. And the polling that's just been done in the last couple of days showed that 23% of independents and 10% of Democrats say it's make them less likely to vote for the president. So I think it's the right thing to do. I think it actually represents Republican philosophies, and I agree completely with Ted Olson, who's been an icon and he's a legend in Republicans. So for him to take this stance, it really sends a signal for Republicans to do the right thing. And at bottom, I agree with the great Texas philosopher Kinky Friedman, who says gay couples should have the right to be just as miserable as straight couples.
All right, I think on that, we'll take a little break for a commercial. We'll be back in 1 minute. Mark Mckinnon brought out something. You have talked, Mr. Olson, about there may be kind of a libertarian strain running through part of the Republican Party that is talking about less government in people's lives, and that this might be one place where we might see a change there. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, I think that marriage is a conservative value. Equality is a conservative value. I'm not saying that those aren't liberal values either, but the Republican Party is the party of Abraham Lincoln. Equality and independence, and people that love one another, that wish to form a stable bond, a part of our economy, a part of our community. That should be a conservative value. 45 years ago, the Supreme Court held unanimously that 14 states that prohibited interracial marriage were violating the Constitution. In those states, our president today, his mother and father could not have been married without committing a felony. Today, we can't believe that in America, interracial couples were not permitted to be married just 45 years ago in many states of the United States. I'm hoping that we're coming to the point when we can give the same respect and decency to individuals who wish to marry someone of the same sex. And as the Prime Minister of Great Britain said, I'm not for gay marriage despite the fact I'm a conservative. I'm for gay marriage because I'm a conservative.
Well, let me go to Tony Perkins then. How do you respond to that? Do you ever see evangelicals coming around to the point of view of Ted Olson?
No, I mean, I think, look, when you look at interracial marriage, that was wrong. There was no reason to be opposed to that because you had two people who met the definition of marriage between a man and a woman. And that's consistent with natural law, which our civil rights are based on. When you look at same-sex marriage, that's counter to natural law. And again, we see what comes along, and this is not theoretical, we've actually seen it, where parents lose the right to determine what their children are taught in school, religious organizations forced to recognize or allow their facilities to be used for weddings such as this. So I don't see that happening. I see this more along the lines of the abortion debate. This, you can make it legal, but you can't make it right. And I do not think that you're going to see the Republican Party coming to agreement on this. I do think there's this libertarian viewpoint, but the key to less government is to ensure that kids have moms and dads, not just two caregivers, because if it were two, three would be better. It's moms and dads. That's what's important.
Well, let me talk to Clay about this, because he had a big decision to make, and after you had your first child, you decided that you needed to come out. And I would just like to ask you, what kind of an impact did that have on your professional career? Because I know the base of country music, which is something I know a little bit about, is fairly conservative.
I think today it's even less conservative in Nashville, in the country music world, than it was in 2003 when I was on Idol. It hasn't really had much of an impact at all in a negative sense. It's had more of a positive impact. I think between the time of 2003 to today, we've seen, as we've seen with gay marriage polling, we've seen minds changing. We've seen people becoming more open and understanding of homosexuality. I want to address the fact that, you know, what you just said a second ago. When my mother married my stepfather, she went to a church, a Baptist church, and since she had been divorced, they wouldn't let her get married there. So churches are able to decide who gets married at a church, and regardless, obviously you've got people who make the argument that interracial relationships, back in the 70s, people made the same arguments against interracial relationships as they're making against same-sex marriages today. So I really strongly believe that in the next 20 years, we're going to look back on this and be sort of ashamed of the fact that we were against this, just as we are ashamed today that we didn't let people of different races get married.
Where do you see this going, Mark?
Well, the arc of history is bending forward, and it's not going backwards. And I respect Tony's position. I have a lot of friends like Tony who say that they take literally words that were written in Scripture 2,000 years ago. But I, like Ted, take words that were written 200 years ago in the Declaration of Independence that guaranteed the pursuit of happiness literally as well.
Are you going to take part in this campaign, Tony?
Which campaign is that?
Well, the presidential campaign.
We will be, what I have heard since the president's announcement on Wednesday are from pastors across the nation, African-American pastors, white pastors, who were sitting on the sidelines because they weren't sure about Mitt Romney. I think that Barack Obama has helped fit that missing piece of intensity that Mitt Romney is going to need. I don't endorse candidates, won't be endorsing a candidate, but certainly will be working to advance those issues that families across this country care about.
Ted Olson, are you going to take part in this campaign? Because I know sometimes you're active and sometimes you're not. Has anybody from the Romney campaign asked you to help out?
No, they haven't so far. And Bob, maybe it'll be necessary for me to participate in the campaign if we have a real close election like we had in 2000, and I can be, my skills as a lawyer can be brought to play. But otherwise, I'll wait and see if anyone asks.
And of course, what you're talking about is you argued in the Bush v. Gore, you argued for the president. And David Boies, who joined you in this argument against the ban on gay marriage in California, joined you in that election controversy. Of course, he was on the opposite side. Clay, where do you go from here? Are you going to be out campaigning? Are you going to vote for President Obama this time?
I voted for President Obama last time. I'm sure I'm just as I think all gay men and women are probably more energized to vote for President Obama now, and so I'll definitely be helping how I can.
And do you think people on the other side, Tony Perkins, are also energized by this?
Well, I think it does draw a very clear line of distinction on a very important issue. Again, this is the reason I think we see the abortion issue and this issue as strong parallels is because of the fact that it runs counter to nature, to natural law, which is what our rights are found in the Declaration of Independence. So it's based on that natural law. The reason will get us there. People have a hard time finding a reasonable approach to same-sex marriage.
All right. Well, I want to thank all of you for joining us this morning. I'll be back in a minute with some thoughts about moms on Mother's Day.
This portion of Face the Nation is sponsored by Xerox. With Xerox, you're ready for real business.
I remember when my mother died, a friend said it takes a long time before you stop thinking of your mother every day. My mother died decades ago, and I'm still waiting for that day. Somehow, some way, not a day passes that I don't think of her at least once, most days 4 or 5 times. She was a child of the Depression who was widowed at an early age, but she devoted her life to seeing that her 3 children got what had been denied her, a college education. We all graduated. We were afraid not to. Yes, she loved us, but she was a tough customer who expected, demanded no less. Maybe that's why we made sure that all her grandchildren graduated too. In the autumn of my life, I still hope she knows somehow when I do something that makes me proud. The other part is I still worry that she'll find out about the things I'm not so proud of and come after me. In an election year, we talk about so many things that make a nation what it is and ought to be. But I believe the real core of our strength goes much deeper, and it's simpler. It goes to the mothers who teach us what is right and wrong. All the rest of it grows out of that. So happy Mother's Day, moms. Yours is still the most important job of all. Back in a minute.